Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. This was a spot for Buffalo. James Cook now is becoming a real part of this offense. All of a sudden, Dallas on the road falls behind. Dak's not the same quarterback behind. Are you surprised, however, how the Bills ran the ball on the Dallas defense? It was, I don't remember seeing the Dallas defense, run defense, that poor for a couple years.
To me, one thing that Dallas over the last month, why a lot of us have been buying in, is because of their physicality, like just their overall toughness. And today, Buffalo kicked their ass. I mean, that Colin was a beatdown. And I think I said last week when we watched Buffalo pull that crazy game out against Kansas City, it's hard to take them seriously when all their games are like that. They were like the better version of the Chargers. They just found a way to win some of them. But today, you got to give them their ceiling. I mean, they have a couple wins this year. That Miami win early in the season, Miami's pretty good. That game against Dallas today, like their ceiling is pretty high. When they're on, obviously playing at home, the division is still open. Like the division is not set. Miami's schedule is very hard. They play Dallas, they play the Ravens, then they finish with Buffalo. You look at Buffalo's schedule at the Chargers, who mailed that thing in, the Pats, and then they finish, like we said, with Miami. They've kind of reeled me back in because today wasn't as much about Josh Allen just going LeBron James or Steph Curry. It was more the defense annihilated McCarthy's offense. And like you said, the run game, what has Buffalo always lacked? It's they've never had a running back beside Josh. Well, if you can get a guy, you don't need him to get 180 yards every game, but if you can rely on an individual to be a 100-yard-a-game guy in cold weather games, hard not to like Buffalo and look at them a little differently after the last 60 minutes, right?
You know, I was thinking about the Steeler teams with Tomlin when Ben was in his prime, and they had like, a Le'Veon Bell. And that's what Buffalo reminds me of. They didn't win, they got a Super Bowl. No question, a couple with Ben. But this is what Buffalo reminds me. A defensive coach, a defensive culture with a star quarterback that's about 70% of the offense. And when they had the star running back kind of in his prime as an energy, a twitchy energy player, Pittsburgh always had a star receiver on the outside. They draft and develop receivers better than Buffalo. But this is really what they remind me of. This is a Big Ben Steeler team with a defensive coach, defensive culture that has enough offensive pieces to win. And when I watch them today, I'm like, not everybody peaks at the right time. Rams are a totally different team than 6 weeks ago. Don't even look like the same team. Sure. I mean, that's a dangerous team now. They're blowing people out. So do you buy my Bills look like a Steeler comp, Ben, Josh Allen, defensive coach with a very, very energized running back?
Yeah, don't hate it at all. And like the Pittsburgh, they're comfortable playing outside, right? And look at the AFC. It's hard to know how the seeding is going to shake out, but they would be comfortable. We've seen them go on the road in Kansas City and play well, go on the road in Baltimore and play.
Miami.
Right? Cleveland, no problem. Miami, no problem. They won't. They view Miami as an inferior team, right? So you go, listen, if this team gets in there and they have a chance to run the table and get to 11-6, I mean, a couple weeks ago, it felt like the building was on fire. And this is where you got to give McDermott and Josh and some of the guys internally some credit. They handled it. They kept, kind of the train on the tracks. Little lucky, however you want to look at last week, it played out. They won the game. And today, they beat the living shit out of the Cowboys. And that was, listen, a lot of people were betting on the Bills. It's another thing to be up 30-3 and the Cowboys struggled to get over 100 yards of offense with 5 minutes left to go in the game. I don't think anyone saw that. And that's kind of a rough reflection on Dallas that, the Eagles, obviously the story today, changing defensive coordinators, guys are sick. They're working through some stuff. But how's that team going to go on the road and beat the Niners? Because you want to take Dallas seriously as this NFC contender, this team that go to the Super Bowl. And then you watch a game like today, you're like, how does that happen?
Well,
how does that happen?
Don't the Cowboys play Miami next? Okay,
yes.
So this is classic NFL. Dallas gets humiliated, physical team. So they are going to flex physically. Miami finesse team blows out a physical Jets team. They come back to earth. Watch Dallas face Miami and push them all over the field for 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it a mile away. Dallas is coming out.
I like Dallas.
Yeah,
I like Dallas.
They're coming out. They just got humiliated. And not only did they get humiliated, they were pushed around the field. So the whole week of Cowboy practices, let's get back to physical football. So, folks, I had a really good Sunday today. I had the Lions, I had the Bills, I had the Rams. Okay, not so good on San Francisco, Arizona. Take the Cowboys right now against Miami.
And the other thing with Dallas, right? We'll see how tomorrow plays out. They still, Drew Lock's probably going to be the quarterback. But what if the Eagles lose, right? The Cowboys would still get a little life, just on a Monday night, sitting at home, get to look in the mirror, take a deep breath. Miami's a much better matchup than that version of whatever we just saw out of Buffalo, the way they just played.
There is something, I always felt there are certain glamour franchises, the Lakers, Texas football, the Dallas Cowboys, that it's almost impossible as the NFL's gotten younger. You get this young Cowboy team, and they're on every show. I mean, if the Jags go on a 7-game winning streak, guys like me, Stephen A., doesn't matter who it is, we don't talk about them. Cowboys go on a 3-game winning streak. Every player turns on the TV. How about them Cowboys? And I do think it's really hard to sometimes manage young athletes when they're rolling. I think it's harder to be Sark or Mike McCarthy because you become a centerpiece of discussion and elevation. And I think Dallas kind of just got into Dallas. And this is what happens. They win, they roll, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, this is the NFL. We're going up to cold Buffalo. I mean, there was not a minute of that game. Dallas was not ready to compete today.
Well, you know what? I've always had the take of, I didn't love paying Dak $40+ million a couple years ago. Thought he was a little overrated. And then he's kind of shutting you up. He started to play really good football. You're like, this guy might win the MVP. And then you watch today and you go, yeah, that's kind of the guy. It's like, he's still got that in him. He's done it in the playoffs the last 2 years against the Niners. How is there any scenario without major injuries where you can see the Cowboys beating the 49ers? Because I struggled to do that. I don't think it exists.
Yeah, I think Dak is a different quarterback trailing, and most quarterbacks are. But the difference between Dak at home leading and Dak on the road trailing, it's like two players, right? Like it really is. And most quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield's always he's a good front runner. He's not good trailing, but we don't consider Baker Mayfield to be a $45 million a year quarterback. So I look at Dak and, there are components to Dallas that feel like a Super Bowl team. A good quarterback having a great year, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Dak, good quarterback having a great year. A really unique energy, play well at home, have a knockout punch somewhere on the perimeter as a weapon. But those teams didn't win Super Bowls. And I just feel like in order to win a Super Bowl, Dallas being a wild card team potentially, it'd be just at San Francisco, at a Philadelphia, at Detroit. That's really hard. Cincinnati almost pulled it off a few years ago, but they were, Burrow was on just a streak. But I just think, I just think Dallas, I think it's a hard ask for anybody if you don't have a star quarterback.
Yeah, I think those two teams you named, they got home games. And like you said, this team more than likely is going to be the 5th seed. And they're going to be a heavy favorite in that first game. But Tampa's got some good players. It might not be as easy as it was last year, right? So, and then right away, you got to go on the road to Philly, to San Francisco, to Detroit, depending on how the seeding shakes out. And that's a lot to ask. And let's face it, because like you said of the brand, do they get thrown on Monday Night Football game again? And then all of a sudden you get that weird kind of shorter week, even if you get the afternoon Sunday window. Because I would say, if it's them against whatever team no one cares that much about in the South, it's an easy Monday Night Football game because it's big ratings. That's kind of what it's been. So, I have a hard time. I think it's borderline. One, they haven't been in the conference championship in 2.5 decades. And then when they still have this in the back, I mean, they have two, even if you give them the Arizona game, weird loss to a bad team, they had 2 real games against Buffalo and against San Francisco with a lot of hype coming into the game. They had momentum coming into the game, and they got destroyed